latest episode of the Radio Beaver podcast. In recent weeks, we've heard from Gary McCann, Jack Slavar, Dean Inman, Alan Julian, all about the sad end to the season. And as sad as it has been, there's no doubt about it, for all concerned at Hampton Richmond Borough Football Club. It's been a great season, and it was important, I felt, to sit down with those involved to recap the events and some of the moments of this season. So I sat down with Manager Gary McCann, Mark Findley, who is the physio and fitness coach, Phil Weller, who's board member, COVID officer and head of the Supporters Trust, and also Rui Donaldson, obviously one of the firm favourites for Hampton and Richmond Borough on the pitch. We just sat down, had a chat, discussed what had gone on in the season, looked at the positives and look towards the centenary and what we can try and achieve and what we can aim to do next season, and take whatever has happened this season and whatever the records will say, hopefully take all the positives out of that and use it for next season. That's certainly the burning thing that came through to me during this whole great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. It was a pleasure to do, and once again, thanks very much to all four for giving up their time and their expertise and their insight. Really, it was a joy to do, and I hope you enjoy listening to it.
If we take ourselves back to the start of this season, obviously there was some mini pre-season training at the football club in two different stages in the end, wasn't it? Mark, how important was it to keep the players going during the first lockdown?
It was uncertain periods, Seb, and we weren't quite sure when football was going to start again. And the important thing was keeping the players engaged. So it was important, even with our first summer camp that we did in June, just to get the players back together, look at their condition, just their basic condition. We did give out some pointers and some tips during lockdown, and the emphasis was you do need to try and look after yourselves, because we didn't know whether we could come back into some sort of playoff scenario. So the summer camp was just important, one, to just look at the boys' condition and get their touches with the ball and get some skill level and some sports training back into their routine, because it was a long time. Obviously, the first lockdown, I think it was literally, 3 months really? So it was a very long time without ball and without training drills. So that is a long time physically. And the body does lose a lot in that time.
Yeah, and Rue, obviously you are known as one of the more fitter players in the squad, but you couldn't rest on your laurels and had to complete the work and the like during that and the summer training camp. How good was it to get back and like Mark said there, get some ball time and start to look forward?
I think Mark touched on it. I think the most important facet of those kind of summer camps was getting everyone back together and just familiarising yourself with the group and coming together again as a changing room. That first lockdown was a long period away from each other. And in terms of fitness, it was critical to kind of get back to the levels that we were at the season prior. I think that's one of our strengths as a team, was we were fitter and harder working than other clubs. But yeah, it was good to get around the boys, but also important that if we were to either continue the season or look to go into the new season, that we would have the same sort of identity as a football team and have those high levels of fitness again.
I was lucky enough to be there the first time that all the boys got together again, and it showed the team spirit again, didn't it? I know I keep saying this, I've said this on various podcasts and various things, that there is a genuinely good team spirit amongst this group of lads, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. It's always a strange time, the start of pre-season, because there's new faces, there's boys that perhaps have been looking around, and it's just that first session is really important to gauge where you are, both in a fitness sense, but also in terms of a squad. You see, we were fortunate enough this year, we kept a lot of the same guys from last year, so that continuity and that kind of comradeship that you'd built up over the previous year, I think it was a real strength of ours, and that first session was the kind of start again, and just to kind of re-emphasise those kind of team values and team identity.
Yeah, and I think as part of that spirit and a part of that atmosphere, was it quite surprising to see one of the fittest people there was maybe the manager who'd maybe made the most of lockdown?
Yeah, definitely. The improvements that the gaffer had made over the lockdown period. I know he was big in his cycling, and I'm a massive cyclist myself, so we were having a bit of chat about that. But yeah, I think that shows it. I think lockdown was a period for all of us, and I think most people went in the way that the gaffer went and looked at it as a kind of self-improvement period. But it was difficult. It was very difficult to have that kind of self-motivation to keep the fitness levels high during that period.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously Phil, when everyone was coming back to, they came back to the Bev, didn't they? I remember them all in the terrace under the stand there. You obviously had a really important role with your COVID officer responsibilities, and then obviously I know a lot's happened since then. But were you daunted at the time about getting all the players and everyone back together as normal?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, I didn't use the lockdown very successfully for self-improvement. I got, when I say appointed, I got volunteered for the role, not on the basis of any sort of qualifications, because I wouldn't claim to have any, but I was the only one who lived near the ground, because initially the appointment was intended to be from the board of directors. The league later relaxed that, but by then it was done, and there I was. So starting from zero knowledge really, and step into the unknown for everyone, and I certainly didn't want to do it. I'd literally just taken an early retirement, and I was looking forward to putting my feet up, and I've done anything but that. And I wouldn't have done it had it not been for the group I was dealing with, because I had a strong sense that, certainly compared with some of my COVID officer colleagues, I was in for relatively few problems with this group. It is a well-run group, and if there's one thing that I've learnt through this unusual position of having been with the players every single training session, every single match for however many months this has been, 6 months, whatever it is, it just gave me a very clear understanding of the level of dedication that goes into this. These boys and the management team are incredibly committed, and the time they give, the travel time, that some of these guys are coming from all over the place. And even Roo, he has to run from the underground station to get to the training ground because he's often late. No, he's not. That's not fair. But he does run. I passed him in the car waiting for him a couple of times. Yeah, no, the commitment was tremendous, and I had every confidence that it would be made as easy for me as possible, and it was. But was it daunting? Yes, because of the unknown, because of the threat of COVID, and frankly, at that point, nobody fully understood it. And in some respects, the league were very good in the guidance and the plans that they put in place. Mistakes were made, but of course they were. Nobody knew where we were going with it. And I had Mark helping, of course.
I was going to push on to that.
On hand, and the other person who just gave an immense amount of help without getting any of the publicity or perhaps acknowledgement was Dave Rees. Dave just really took hold of all the paperwork in terms of getting risk assessments. I wouldn't have known where to start, but Dave was there. He's done over 1,000 risk assessments in his career. Works for Red Cross, so he was a real asset. Made the whole thing a lot easier for me.
Yeah, so again, I think it just shows the volunteer, base at the football club and that. And Mark, you did have a lot to do on the COVID side, as well as the fitness side of things, and well as the training side of things. You had to be, on call for that. Was it very strange times, but something you just had to get on with?
Yeah, it was very strange. It was just about making people safe, from staff members, from just personnel around the camp, everyone involved, even people's families, friends, everyone involved. It was just putting everything in place, good practices. And I must say, Phil did a great job in terms of helping me, putting things together and implementing them with the group. Also, Faddy, our doctor, he had a big role in just giving us some knowledge and insight from his point of view. And obviously the club were very supportive in getting us things like PPE. And obviously we've mentioned David Rees, his work around the club to get just the training ground, the ground just prepared and self-assessed was immense and was great.
Yeah, it does seem a lot's happened since then. It does seem a long time ago, but it's important to reflect on how good and everyone came together. But yeah, Phil, you got that.
Actually, you mentioned Faddy, which I'd forgotten to, but remembered as soon as I'd finished it. The most daunting bit was actually finding a doctor. This was a task dumped on all the North and South clubs, only I think 3 of whom actually had a doctor at that point. The national ones already had doctors, or nominally already had doctors, whether they were active. And I know some clubs had terrible trouble getting hold of what you called a medical officer, but it had to be a doctor. And we were incredibly fortunate. And again, that was partly to do with Dave, who put a message out at West Middlesex Hospital via somebody he knew there, went up on the notice board, and apparently some nurse went up to Faddy and said, have you seen this? Think it might suit you. So what a stroke of luck. And there's a guy who thought he was a football fan and supported Man United, but now he's a proper football fan. So it's been a growth experience for him too.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been a key presence throughout the games this season. Gary, with all this going on and everything, but you had to assemble a squad together, and Rue said you kept a lot of the squad together, and we did lose a couple of players. But how good was it to go into the season prepared, given Mark and the players' dedication? But how good was it to go into the season with a real good squad and start the season with a good group of players and on and off the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, you've had a positive campaign, Seb. The big challenge is retention over and above recruitment. I think when you've done so well and you've earned the plaudits as such, and we had in that year prior going into last summer, your concern is that you're gonna have your players picked off. I think that's a fear for any manager going into the summer period, and it was last year. And the fact we only lost Danilo as such, and obviously Wada stepped away, but it meant that we had the bulk of the squad back. And when you've got that basis to build from, it makes your job a lot easier. It makes recruitment a lot easier because you can be a little bit more picky, and you have a bit more patience in your recruitment. If you think of the 2 summers prior to last summer, it was a drastic improvement. We'd virtually been sitting with nothing in the changing room. So that in itself made my task easier. As I say, I could add the right ones to it. We didn't commit too early to that. We knew we needed to bring a front runner in with the loss of Danilo, and we managed to get Nathan and Nico over the line to add to that. Obviously, Ryan went off a few games in, but we managed to deal with that as well and accommodate that. The recruitment, I feel, and most of it is about recruitment, Seb, over the course of any successful team. It's as much as we can coach, we can organise, we can prepare. It is about putting the right group of players together, and I think we've managed to do that over the last couple of years, and we'll be looking very much to do exactly the same going into next season. The bulk of the retainees, hopefully, and again, recruitment being the right ones in the right areas.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose a narrow defeat to St Albans, and then a really good point against Dartford, who obviously have shown the reason why they're one of the more highly fancied sides.
This is, however, Hornchurch's 5th penalty, and it is Ronnie Wynn, the substitute.
And that's Hampton through. Come on.
Get in there. Alan Julian has saved a penalty, and the Hampton players are elated.
And that's Hampton in the pot. We are in the bag.
In the pot for the 4th qualifying round. Hampton have won the penalty shootout 4-3.
Do you think the FA Cup result against Hornchurch did help just give you a bit more of a kickstart?
I think it was. It was our third game of the season, wasn't it? And although it went to penalties and it was our first run, it maybe gave us a bit of momentum and a kickstart as such. I had belief in the group. I truly had belief in the group. And as much as we hadn't won in those first 2 games, if you was at the St Albans game, there wasn't much in it. It looked like it was 2 teams that hadn't had a competitive game for 5 or 6 months. As much preparation went into the summer camp and pre-season, it doesn't replicate competitive games. So that wasn't a great spectacle, but I didn't feel we deserved to lose that game. And against Dartford in the next one, I felt we deserved to win the game. We definitely dominated long periods of the first half and was quite evenly contested second half, but there was belief from the management team in the group we'd assembled, and it was only a matter of time that kicked through the gears, really.
Yeah, and Rue, obviously we've done well in those. We've done all right, like as Gary said, we've done okay in those early games. But what was it like for a player, and I've spoken to a number of players about this, but what was it like as a player to play in front of 30, 40 people, mostly people connected with the club, and like Phil, Faddy, I was there as media, luckily enough. But what was it like to walk out of the Bev and there not to be very many people there? It must have been strange.
Yeah, it was very strange, and it wasn't particularly enjoyable. It felt initially, certainly, that we were playing pre-season friendlies, and I think to try and increase that level of intensity that you need to go into and be successful in our league, it was hard to create that and self-generate that as a changing room. I mean, I think that probably spoke to a number of teams struggling in those early games as we did. And yeah, it was just, it felt as though it was very quiet. It felt you could hear both teams speaking, and there was like an emptiness, and it was like a sense of, are we really doing this properly, or are we just kind of having a kick about? And you can hear both sides of managers shouting on, and it was just a very strange, peculiar experience.
And Phil, obviously you've been a spectator at not a spectator, obviously you've been COVID officer, but you have technically been a spectator at every game. How strange was it, obviously, to be at these games? And again, you were, one of the few people there. It was a privilege, obviously, but at the same time, it was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah. Was it a privilege? It didn't feel like a privilege. It felt like sort of Billy No Mates as the only person sitting in the Simpsons stand at some points. I didn't like it either, Roo. I found it all very strange. Do you know what I enjoyed a little bit more as the season went on was actually the away games, because there's not a vast number of Hampton fans at the away games anyway. There might be 50 or whatever, but even when they're there, they're dotted around the ground a bit. What you have at the home game with all the fans together, that was gone, and that was the massive rift. Away was sort of okay, because although there may have only been a dozen of us around, the press, couple of directors, what have you, that and the staff and the subs alongside made a little Hampton group. And there's one game, and then we'll come to it later, where that group was particularly together and particularly effective, and it was like having an away crowd there. And I've always enjoyed the away games, partly because our results always seem better away, not just under Gary for years and years. So the homes I could have done without being there, in all honesty, because I'm sitting there thinking, and I was getting texts, from Melissa saying, yeah, here with a glass of Merlot, enjoying the Zoom. They're freezing my balls off, shouting at two Hampton reserves to space out on the terrace.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that is true. Mark, you obviously help get all the stats together for all the players, and obviously they're normally quite high. Did you notice a difference in intensity in the early games in that, and just a natural indifference? I'm not saying...
You saying that normally... At the start of the season, Steb, you are still picking up your match intensity levels. So there is normally a slight drop. But this season in particular, especially if you look at our stats over the 5 months we played, October was a little bit lower. And I think we had our pre-season camp. We had a 9-week pre-season camp. It was quite a long one. So I think the boys were fully prepared. There was enough training games, friendlies. We had 10 in total. But you could, once the game started for real, you did see that slight drop in intensity to normal start of the seasons. It was quite apparent. And that's probably is to do with the crowd. But from a coaching and for a physio point of view, for ourselves, we had to try and create an intensity, and we went into games with that same work ethic. And like with everyone, I'm not saying the players didn't, but we all wanted to get 3 points. But once the players go across that white line, it must have felt alien for them to have to perform to those great intense levels.
Yeah, and Gary, no more was the lack of fans felt when we hosted Oldham Athletic for the FA Cup at the Bev, which would have been absolutely bouncing, wouldn't it? And who's to say they might have sucked the ball in towards the end when we were looking for that equaliser. But how proud were you as a manager of Hampton and Richmond once again in front of the cameras in that game against Oldham?
Yeah, I've been proud since the day I walked through the door, really, Seb. It's full of good people. I think it's mentioned that the efforts of Phil and Faddy and everyone around the ground, the community structure that's in place, the bits the football club do away from the football is second to none. I think on that day, again, the Oldham day, what you couldn't help but reminisce about the game the season before. It was a Monday evening. The place was bouncing, as you just said. It was just the atmosphere was electric, and it just felt that we'd been served up with another fantastic opportunity for us all to be involved and be part of. These FA Cup games don't come around often enough, and the fans couldn't be there. So there was no other game more so than that one that it was highlighted to such a level. It was disappointing that we had to do it without them there. I was proud of the performance, of course. So as I said, I was proud of the way we went about our task right from game one. It was a challenge in itself, and there was plenty to recreate, and there were some adjustments to be made in terms of preparation and getting players where they needed to be intensity-wise. But it's a club that we all want to be experiencing them occasions together, and we just never got the chance on that particular day.
Yeah, and I think what impressed me one of the most this season, actually, and I think what Phil was alluding to just moments ago, was we played on a Sunday, didn't we? It was Sunday, wasn't it? Sunday lunchtime kickoff.
Yeah.
A bit strange. Anyway, but we then played Hungerford, who were top of the league at the time. And I have to say, I do agree with Phil. I think that might be the most, I want to say, unsung performance of the season, because that was incredible, the levels of intensity. Mark, what did you do to the players for them to have that, intensity for that game? Because that, like Phil alluded to, and I remember watching that game, the players were relentless, and Rui, you were obviously one of those players. That really was an impressive performance. How did you get those players up from Sunday afternoon disappointment to almost miraculous performance?
Well, after most games, Seb, we always send out a recovery protocol for the players. But considering it was a Sunday game, and obviously Monday, it's a normal work day for most of the boys. So for them, the onus was really on them, although we do put protocols in place for them to get to recharge, recover, eat the right foods, do their Monday night stretches and proper cool downs and recovery sessions. But then I just think they just had an intent about them on Tuesday to go about their business. And for me, it was one of the most pleasurable performances of this season, just because they came back off the big occasion of the Oldham FA Cup, and then 48 hours later having to travel all the way to Hungerford, who were in good condition at the time, and then to serve up our best levels of the season. Our midfield was fantastic. The players who came in, special mention to Miles Anderson, Ryan Gondo, and I think Imran, they all came those games and they performed at real top level. And just one big mention, Sam Deadfield, his levels, that was his highest level. I think he ran nearly 12K in that game, which is, for a player at our level to do in any game, is immense. He was everywhere.
Yeah, and Phil, like you said, there was that pocket of us, wasn't there? Media and a couple of us right behind the dugout. And I think that might have helped, well, like you say, foster that almost away feel.
Yeah, I was immensely proud of the club that day, not just the team. I was very proud of the team for all the things that Mark's outlined. And Mark is sitting there taking all the credit for getting them fit. But I think what drove them on was actually Gary breaking the world record for shouting, "Get to the ball" in 90 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
I was absolutely buzzing driving home. The hairs were standing up on the back of the neck. I was shaking. And that's pride in the effort that was put in. And that the way that midfield swarmed on their defence. And our little contribution from the bench, and we were sitting right behind the bench, Seb, if you remember, is we were shouting and their players were reacting as if our players were right on top of them, even when they were 10 yards away. We literally collectively as a group put the scarers on their players, and they were scared to play after a while.
Yeah. And they were top of the league, weren't they, before? Unbeaten at home. I think they were unbeaten, weren't they, Gary?
Yeah, you don't hear the words high-flying Hungerford very often, but they were clear top of the league at that point, and that burst their bubble. Their chairman did admit to me their player of the season by a million miles at that early point was their goalkeeper. Yeah. So then they weren't quite sure why they were top, but nevertheless, only beat us there.
Just to give a bit of insight, Mark, and without giving too much away, obviously, but you mentioned there that Sam got 12K. What sort of figures are the big players? Is it like 10 to 11K per match? Yeah,
10 to 11K, especially for a midfield player. And that's what we look to achieve. And that's a good level of fitness for a midfielder. For let's say, like a centre-back, it's obviously less than that. We're looking at more 9 to 10K. Wide players, we do have players like Rue, who's exceptional as well, not just because he's on the podcast here, but his levels are always there between 10 and 11K. But those are our averages generally. And it's because we've got a fit team, Seb, to be honest with you. We've got players who are physically, they do look after themselves away from the game. They like to invest in their own bodies. And it's brilliant to see come a game day.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, we went on a bit of a run there, apart from the home defeat against Hemel, but we've been talking about amazing away performances. The game against Billericay away was incredible.
Has license to get forward, but Nico Muir here is taking on his man on the edge of the box. He's in the Billericay area to go goal, and it's 2-1 to the Beavers. Come on! Nico Muir getting. That is absolutely brilliant from him. He gets down the touchline, cuts inside, he takes on Ronnie Henry, couple step overs and slots into the bottom corner. 2-1 to the Beavers.
That.
Oh, it's a long shot. Well saved by John Curtis Henry, and it's in in the back? It is in the back of the net. It's 3-1 to Hampton Richmond Borough. You wouldn't believe it.
Getting better every single game by game. Ryan Gondo's free on the edge of the box. Sam Dudfield's put a lovely ball. Ryan Gondo slipped in the box, but Nico Muir slotted it home. And Nico Muir has slotted it home to make it 4-1 to Hampton and Richmond Borough. Hampton and Richmond Borough have scored 4 goals.
But here we go. Tackle here. Ryan Gondor. It's 5-2. Get in. 5-2 to the Beavers. Ryan Gondor, 2 goals, 2 assists, and all 11 of them are going over to celebrate.
Hampton and Richmond Borough just keeping the ball. And Nathan Minas has just scored an absolute beauty and made it 6-2. Edge of the box, turned and has absolutely slammed that ball home. Now, that is, we scored some goals today, but that might be the best one of the lot.
Well, we spoke to Jules and Dino a couple of weeks ago, and they said that given their connections, they know the Billericay players, and they were saying that every time we attacked, they thought we were going to score. Which, Rue, when it's going that well, is it just a joy to be playing football?
Yeah, he's not the best one to ask on this. He had the ump on this day. You had the rest this day.
I just realised that since I asked.
I hope his answer's going to be with his team hat on.
Pressure.
Let me ask, mate. What was it like watching that game?
Most free-flowing attacking game of the season I wasn't a part of, so that probably speaks volumes. No, it was incredible to watch the guys, the front three especially, were on fire that day. Every time we had the ball, and some of the interplay, some of the touches from the forward players that day was incredible. That 3G enables you to play that style of football where there's a lot of one-touch passing and a lot of quick interchange of possession. There's a little bit, I think, frost on the ground given it was late November, so it was flyers zipping around. Yeah, it was.
And then the game which we did score in and played very well again as well. But to go to Chippenham, it was fair to say it was the other end of the scale against Chippenham, wasn't it? I do believe Bill had to wash your shirt about 3 times due to excessive celebration. But
it was my Klinsman.
Yeah. But yeah, and again, Chippenham's a long way away, and I know all the players, you have a full-time job. You're getting in early hours of the morning after that, but it must be hard to relax or to get to sleep even after a long journey, to come down off a high when the team's playing so well.
Yeah, it's a combination of kind of the adrenaline of post-game. Also, if you're driving, you don't really switch off mentally. So you don't start that process until you actually arrive at home. I think also in terms of some of my preparation for the game, I take quite a lot of caffeine. So that has quite a long half-life. So I'm still feeling those effects when I get in.
Yeah.
So when you combine those kind of elements plus scoring and just the adrenaline of the match day, you come home. And it's even though it's 2 a.m. and you've got work at 8 o'clock, you're still absolutely buzzing and you can't sleep. You're playing the goal through in your head, and it's very difficult.
Oh, brilliant. And I suppose this is when we start to hit December, and obviously off the pitch, there's a lot of happening, and COVID and coronavirus is being talked about more and more. And unfortunately, it starts to affect games. We get the game against Slough is postponed. And so, Phil, what's happening around these times, and what's the chatter amongst the COVID officers? Is it a bit of fear almost?
It's hard now to remember the point at which the fear kicked in. I suspect the fear kicked in a little later than that. I think there was still optimism, because I'm thinking, when was St Albans? That was when we had the crowd in.
Of course, yeah. Yes, of course. Good point.
Well, welcome to the Chris Sweet Beverley Stadium. This feels proper. There are fans walking past us. We've spread hello to fans. We've spoken to the volunteers that have been here all week, making sure that they could come into the ground. But there are supporters. There are supporters in the stadium. This is great, isn't it?
It is. It's
small level, but great.
Small level, but great. I mean, it's just brilliant to see the red and blue scarves just walking around now. It feels, whilst obviously it's a smaller number of people, it feels like one step in the right direction back to normality. So it's brilliant.
It does.
And it's full credit to the club in terms of the organisation, the work that's gone on behind the scenes, because so far this has just been impeccable.
But that would have been early December. There were definitely concerns, but nevertheless we did, I think, the right thing. We just had a little trial, some season ticket holders, about 120 people in for St Albans. Disappointing match, but that can happen. But leaving the ground, so many people were saying, thanks for everything you've all done. They could see 700 green footprints painted all over the terraces, all the seats marked up. That all turned out, I say, to be for nothing, hopefully for nothing. Hopefully we can wash them all away come say, end of May.
Yeah.
But there they were. They could see people had put the effort in, all the stuff that had been done, and that people were grateful. And it was sadly very short-lived, and we were back to the lockdown over the Christmas period, the Dorking and Dulwich games, etc.
Yeah, and Gary, did it feel a little bit more normal that day? I know there was only 120, like Phil said, but even just doing the commentary and seeing people walk with a cup of tea in their hand and the like, it felt a bit weird for me, because I think I'm with Phil on that. There was a little bit of fear about what might be happening, but let's enjoy this while we can, essentially.
Yeah, I think there was fear for sure. I think we were getting to a period that it felt like the numbers and the cases were increasing slightly, Seb. And although you hope that this was the start of the return of fans, there was still in the back of your mind that maybe that wasn't going to be the case. You felt there was something brewing, something developing that was going to nullify that. But it was good to have fans back in. We maybe didn't put on the performance that we would like on a football front. For the first time having spectators in the Bev, but it just evolved as the season went on. I think if you take yourself back to the early part, when you touched on the players and everyone alike, management were just so pleased to be back for pre-season, so pleased to start the season, so pleased to get up and running, so pleased to start showing some form, so pleased to be getting an FA Cup run and getting a game of that magnitude. It was just, the momentum was with us.
Sam Deadfield is going to take this. He scored the penalty against Oldham. Is he going to be the hero in this game? It's definitely quiet. There's no fans here. It's too quiet. I'm the only person talking. I'm going to be quiet in a minute and just let the action unfold. Sam Deadfield about to take this penalty when you hear the referee's whistle blow. And it's gone right in the corner. Sam Deadfield puts the Beavers up 1-0 Hampton and Richmond. Sam Deadfield with a penalty in the 85th minute. And that is hard work.
I said there was a goal in this set.
You did say there was a goal in it. And I tell you what, Matt, that's a fantastic penalty. Beavers have taken the lead with 5 minutes to go.
But it just started to evolve into a changing room, and I can't help but say it, as it went on and it got to December and it got to January, there was just a feeling of, there was a discontented feel in the change room that we wasn't maybe being tested, and players were starting to get a bit apprehensive for not only their self but their families. It just started to develop into a situation that wasn't easy to contain.
No, exactly. And Roo, as a player and the like, do you feel that perhaps not enough was quite being done for the safety of overall of the players who had invested so much so far? Not from a club perspective, obviously, with the work that Phil and Faddy and Mark had done, but did it feel a little bit like we were elite footballers in so many things, but not in others?
Yeah, it felt as though we were maybe a little bit left out to dry on the testing front. I certainly would have had a lot more comfort on a personal level if there had been some sort of scheme in place for that. In terms of the elite tag, it was difficult. So I personally was travelling on public transport to and from training and to and from games. And during that period in December, that was quite difficult for me. It felt quite challenging. It felt, particularly when I was reading news reports, that the tube was the kind of hotspot, and to avoid the tube. And I was making efforts to get to football and games on using that method of transport. I think at that stage, I would have felt more comfortable on behalf of my team if I was being tested, because I was coming to training, having spent an hour and a half on the tube. So yeah, it was a strange period, certainly.
It was. And Mark, as someone who obviously not outside of football, obviously works in and knows what's right and what's wrong in terms of medical stuff, were you a little bit surprised that things were carrying on quite as normal?
Yeah, I was very surprised. And I must say first, the club and myself, Phil, we did all that we could to keep the players as safe as we could. But it wasn't quite enough from my point of view. There should have been some testing, and I think the National League should have done more as we were playing, just to implement regular tests for the players, even if it was just once weekly, because the cases were rising, hence why we went into this third lockdown. And I felt we were just left a little bit out in the cold, really, in terms of testing.
Yeah, it's a shame. And obviously things carried on, but we had a cracking result against Dorking.
And Rui Donaldson's going to find Tyrone Mulroney. He's going to put it across goal. Yeah!
Scored in the near post. 2 years ago, Tyrone Mulroney got his last goal. He has just broken that duck. 2 and a bit years later, he gets the goal that just might get something out of this game for the Beavers.
I cannot believe it. And Rob Tyrone Miller-Rodney, not known for shooting, we even talked about it when he last scored. But he's run through on goal. For all the world, I thought he should have laid it back across goal and made it dangerous. But you know what? He's gone for goal and it's gone through Sam House's legs. Tyrone Miller-Rodney has put the Beavers up with 10 minutes to go. He's the goal-scoring hero. He hasn't scored for 2 years. His shooting prowess. I'm glad that he's proved me wrong. See, I take everything back that I said about you. Your shooting is magnificent.
Yeah, Gary, what did you think when Tyrone Miller-Rodney was the match winner, shall we say?
Yeah, well, it was an unlikely scorer. Seb, he doesn't score as many as other midfielders do, but he contributes massively in other aspects of the requirements in midfield. I think he's a really valued member of the team, and it's nice for the spotlight or the plaudits to go to a different individual, and an individual that most of his performances do go unnoticed and unrecognised. So it was really pleasing to see him score. It was a real defensive display that allowed us to gain the 3 points there. Most would say that it was undeserved, but firm believer if you get that aspect to your game where it needs to be and your goalkeeper performs, there's always a chance of you winning. And I thought it was stated as a smash and grab, and it would be hard to argue, but I thought the defensive display on the day was magnificent, and Jules in particular, and Dean Inman's clearance was of the top order. So Tyrell, yeah, brilliant. The defensive display that day was the guiding light.
Harry, didn't you make a brilliant tactical substitution in that game, bringing on a left-sided midfielder to play the ball through to the goal scorer?
Well, most of my substitutions are tactical genius moves, Phil, you know that. That was just one of many. I forgot about that one, sorry.
Not for the first time, Rue changed the flow of a game.
It did seem for 90 minutes that normality was here. And Rue, was there a general feeling in the dressing room that, hang on, we've just beaten Dorking, who in my opinion, it's a game of opinions, isn't it? They're the best side that I've seen us play. But on both occasions, I think that they ask as many questions as they do as anyone else. Was there a general feeling like, hang on, guys, we've got something really brewing here, despite what's going on off the pitch?
Yeah, I think when you combine the Dorking performance and you follow that up with the defeat at home to Dulwich, you perhaps ask yourself some questions. But then to go back it and draw against Dorking and then beat Ebbsfleet, those run of games, I think we felt as though we were slightly hard done by in the Dulwich game with Dean getting sent off, and they scored a couple of goals, one right before half time. So through that period, kind of late December, early January, there was a real turn, and certainly amongst the squad, there was a sense that we were building towards success. I think there were a couple of moments when kind of the management had come in after games and all had been said, and we'd had the breakdown, and then the players just took a moment themselves and had a couple of quiet words, and we were just, a couple of the experienced players were just really trying to force home the point that this was one of the best squads that they had been involved in at this level, and that if we truly believed in ourselves, then success was there for the taking.
Hold his ball through, and it's gone in the goal, and it's a fantastic. It's David Fisher, and David Fisher at the back post has finished that with poise. I mean, what a fantastic goal for Hampton!
I'm having to stop myself from jumping around now. I tell you, what a great goal!
I was not expecting that. It has to be said.
And we've heard the likes of Jules and Dean, who have obviously been involved in successful promotion challenges. I say those things as well a couple of weeks ago. But Mark, obviously games start to get cancelled and at very short notice. Obviously COVID comes when it comes and not much you can do. But how do you keep the players at that level? Because you've taken them to such a level anyway when they're playing the Dorkings and stuff like that. But then to miss some games or miss 2 weeks, how difficult is that?
Well, it is difficult, Seb, but with things like obviously social media now and our contact with players, it was just setting them challenges, keeping them engaged. So we do a lot through sort of WhatsApp, and I set them mini challenges, and a lot of it is based on what they're doing in games. Like, for example, the distances the midfielders would do in a game. I'd ask them to translate that through either doing sort of an outside run, a cycle, and we give them little tasks like that. Also, during the week, we introduced some Zoom sessions as well. So although it wasn't in terms of a cardio aerobic perspective on their fitness. We're keeping their strength up, looking at sort of their core stability and looking at other aspects of their fitness as well. So it was a challenge, but obviously it's just we move with the times, and it was enjoyable. Some of the sessions we did online was enjoyable, little comps, and there's always an end goal to these things, and it's just keeping yourself physically and keeping us on target for our main seasonal goal, and that was obviously to get promotion.
And Gary, we were obviously we do extremely well against Tonbridge and come back and doesn't look like we've been away. The season has obviously ended technically on a bit of a low note in a very cold Ebbsfleet, but it really did look like we were going very much in the right direction, but probably even more so than the season before, the position we were and the teams we played. But I suppose, and you've mentioned this before, that chance has been taken away from us again. That's 2-3 weeks ago the decision was made. Is it still quite raw?
Yeah, it's still with me, Seb. I've had this discussion with a few different managers and players, and even in our evaluation discussions that I had with the players over the last week. You go from having a sensible hat on and understanding the implications of continuing the season with no financial income was just not viable. You understood the club's stance. You totally respected the club's stance and stood by the club's stance. It wasn't an option for us. It would have left us in a really precarious position going into next season, and next season being the centenary year was a big year for us. So you totally understood that. But when you turn the page and you get 2 or 3 days on, that sensible head gets put to one side, and then the heart takes over, and the emotion of losing out a second year on the trot, dealing with a stage in the season where we were building momentum, where Rue has just said there was a belief in the changing room that something could be achieved here. We felt if we could have it, obviously the Ebbsfleet game was disappointing, but there was still a level of performance that told us up against a full-time side, against the fancy side, we stood toe-to-toe with them. We've got a chance really here to muscle in right at the top end of the table and have the playoffs as a fall-off. That was the sort of the belief I was trying to create. It being 2 years on the trot, that overriding emotion takes over, and there's a bit of fear still in me that this group of players is geared for success. How many of them can I retain for next year? I've had the initial talks with all of them, and they've been really positive, Seb. We've had to make some tough choices. We've had to treat the end of February, beginning of March like it's May and it's the end of the season, and we're preparing ourselves for a summer break and pre-season. There's a long time between now and coming back. I've had some reassuring conversations with the players. I'd like to think the majority will be back. We will need to add a bit to the group. The club and board are pretty aware of that. We are going to, look to strengthen in 1 or 2 areas of the pitch. But the main objectives and the real main objectives, as much as we feel that emotional disappointment at the moment, is getting ourselves prepared and ready for, the third year of trying to achieve something with a group of players that have had their seasons ended 2 seasons on the trot. So let's hope it's third time lucky, Seb.
That's what I keep saying to everyone, and I will.
Well, that is the challenge for us all as a football club, as a management team, and as a group of players.
Rue, I just wanted to touch on something that Dean and Jules both mentioned. There did seem to be an overriding acceptance by the players, and these are players yourself. You've invested time, you've invested everything, you sweat or whatever for months and months. However disappointing it was, it seemed that the players all seemed to agree with the decision and the way and the reasons for why it was taken.
Yeah, absolutely. Jax came up one training session and basically put it out to us that this is the reason why the club was making the decision, and there was an acceptance across the playing staff that the club was insulating itself, and whilst there was disappointment because we truly believed that we could achieve something, the wider and the greater picture was the financial stability of Hampton as a people. So yeah, the players, I think during that period it was really difficult, and we had a few players Zooms where we were talking about certain elements to try and keep the season going. But yeah, the players understood when it came to the right thing was done.
Yeah, and Phil, obviously, not just a COVID officer, but a member of the board and party to that decision that was made. It was by no means an easy decision, was it? There was a lot of variables discussed.
Yeah. I was there at that meeting. That was very low, 20 minutes when all the players were being told. And there were a few tears in the eyes, I've got to tell you. And I was one of them. Although I was sick to death of the whole COVID officer and what I felt was turning into a farce of a season, I was very sorry about what was happening to this team and the staff in particular who had put so much in. It wasn't just a financial decision. It was also a decision based on what we perceived to be a league that was becoming, with or without our influence, somewhat farcical. There were already teams that had declared their unwillingness to play on, mostly for financial reasons, some for COVID reasons. There were, I won't name clubs, there were 3 or 4 clubs who were absolutely at the end of their tether. They'd had enough. They'd had enough financially. They'd had enough of not having crowds in. They couldn't see the point. And once you lose that, then, well, that's an overused word, but the integrity of the league was already in question. And it started to feel pointless in trying to just make something happen that really wasn't meant to happen anymore. And it was just circumstance, and it was very sad. And to have it done twice is cruel beyond belief. I would take some solace in that this group of players entertained a lot of people, albeit remotely, for that period of months, played some great football, had a great cup run, and were a credit to the club. And that's not nothing. That's something that was worth doing. And yeah, it ended, but it had to end. And that's all there is to it. And it had to end for the survival of a club in Hampton Village, and for us to be in a strong position to start next year in the centenary season, which will mean a lot to the long-term fans and the new fans. It may mean inevitably a bit less to the players and playing staff. They won't be here forever, but they've invested in that, and now they're looking forward to that as a new start, if you like. We're hoping we can start off in a strong position with a decent budget for Gary to try and build something third time lucky.
Yeah, exactly here, Phil. And Mark, obviously, talking about getting a strong start, and obviously it was obviously apparent that the work we did in last summer, the 2 pre-season camps, made a huge difference big difference in our fitness levels and the like. Are you still giving players that bits to do in between everything?
Well, we are doing a spring training camp, which is probably going to start in April, and we're going to work through then. Just obviously training, getting some base conditioning to the boys. Nothing like match intensity at all, and that will sort of be the first stage of our preparation for next season. And then we'll be due back, all being well, for a normal season next season, and then our pre-season will start sort of end of June. So, and we'll have a 6 weeks pre-season, and then obviously getting the boys up to those match levels, ready for our league winning campaign.
Yeah, that is what I like. This is what I like to hear, the optimism and positivity. And Gary, we've gone from obviously the season's finishing now. Obviously, like you said, we're in beginning of March, and you're having to make difficult decisions because we have to help prepare the club and the players for the next few months. It's been, again, you've made difficult decisions even this week, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of discussions with Ben and Jax in regards to furlough and the costs involved in furloughing players and such. And it was the perimeters were put out to me of where we needed to be, to what level, and how many we could take into that scheme. Again, it's looking after the long-term interests of the football club is bigger and more important than any one individual, any management team, or anything else. So, I had to respect that, but it gave me some really tough moments, a tough couple of days in terms of working out where I needed to be, what I wanted to take forward. I was very much in discussion with the management team in regards to that. And we had to make some tough choices. There was only a certain amount of the 22-man, 21-man squad we was going to be able to take into next season. And it was very much for next season that the choices were made. It did mean that there was some fallout. It did mean there was some disappointment and despondency in some individuals. And the relationships that you look to form and that you look to work and get to a decent level and have an emotional attachment to has maybe been severed, which disappoints me. But it was a club decision. I have to abide by those club decisions and work within them club decisions, Seb, and you can't please everyone as such. And it is the tough side of being a football manager, because it is left for me to deal with that and sort that and disappoint a few. But what I've done, I've I've done everything I possibly can with the best interests of the football club in mind, and that be with the recruitment and retention for next year very much in mind. And as I say, there has been a bit of fallout, and that saddens me, but it is what it is.
Just to finish off on a bright, positive note, what one thing that's happened this season do you look back on and maybe laugh or smile or think it wasn't all irrelevant, essentially? The stats and records will say that the season finished after 17, 18 games. And what will you hold dear to you?
I think there are a couple of moments on the field. The game at Oxford, I think, was a personal highlight. I think the team played incredibly well that day as well.
Long down towards Ruby Donaldson. He's through on goal here. He was onside as well. His shot beats the keeper and goes into the back of the net. So that's 1-0 to Hampton in the 30th minute. On 29 minutes, Ruby Donaldson, he found himself in some space there, some 20 yards out. He managed to get past the defender, and the shot, although it was partially parried by Dudzinski, it rolled into the back of the net to give Hampton the lead.
Yeah, far too powerful strike there from Ruby Donaldson.
It comes inside to Gray. Gray tries a shot. Oh! From Jake Gray.
Absolutely incredible.
35 yards there, James, would you say?
At least
30 yards. A goal out of nowhere. You know, it was a case of where he found that one and what happened. But he saw that Dudzinski was not on his line, he was not covering his goal, and he just let fly with a great shot from at least 30 yards. At least.
But also, for me, winning the FA Cup was incredible. It was something, as a guy who's come from Scotland, to hear about the FA Cup. It's a legend. You spend your younger years watching on the TV and watching on Match of the Day, and just to be part of that was really cool. And that's something that I'll remember. I have the strip. I got a version of the strip. My whole family was bidding on my strip. Yeah, we were able to win that. Yeah, that was a highlight for me, certainly.
Brilliant. And Mark, what about yourself? What about someone who obviously can be seen sometimes in the background, but as I know and as Phil know and as all the guys have said, integral part to the functioning of the football club? What's been your high point?
Although it was an unusual season, just for me, it's just being able to have normality, being around the group, in that although we've had a lot of protocols in place and it was a strange time, but just being around and just being privileged to still be able to work in football. I know a lot of people who haven't had that chance at the levels below, not to even been able to kick a ball or regularly play football. So this season has been a privilege. It's been a weird one, but ultimately just having some normality in a football sense has been my highlight for it all.
Phil, what about yourself? For me, actually, I'm just going to say, whilst we couldn't use it for a successful video of us beating Oldham in the FA Cup, your speech to the players on the training on the Thursday night to the players at Barnet got me in the feels, I have to say. But yeah, one day that might surface, that video, and unfortunately, it certainly helped inspire the players to a certain extent. But yeah, just luck wasn't quite.
Well, that wasn't a highlight for me, Seb, because our goalkeeper took the mick out of me. As the players have for much of the season, to be fair. Gary uses the term togetherness and resilience. He's used it several times post-match, and I saw that at close quarters. That was a privilege, for sure.
Gary, on a final point, the next few weeks and months might seem long, and they might seem, that we were missing the thing that we really do love a lot. Like Phil said, the people have been able to watch the games and stuff like that has been fantastic, and I'm proud and privileged of the work the media team, all of them have done for that, especially. And Dave Rees again, I have to say, Dave Rees and Jason, they've won the Volunteers of the Month award for the National League. What would you say as manager and the focal point of this football club to fans that are listening to this and trying to find some positive from now?
I'd say, Seb, is the work never stops. We're never contented. We're always looking to move forward. I think you need to be progressive in everything you do, never standing still, and that's very much the remit for me and the management team. We've had an excellent season this year. It's been a privilege, as you say, to be playing when so many haven't. Mark just touched on that. As much as it got a bit fragile towards the end, and circumstances become very difficult, it still felt like it was a privilege. And using that word, it was a privilege for myself to lead this football club. It's a special football club with a special, group of people. We'll be doing everything we possibly can to build on the successes of this year, because there was many highlights for me, Seb, over the course of the season. I'm really proud of the group we assembled, the work that went off the pitch. The media team, I think, were an absolute credit to the football club. There was so much good in this year, and it does. And I've had it said to me on a few occasions, and it's very much what I like to create. I like us all to become one. I like everyone to be engaged. It's not just about the players on the pitch. It's not just about the management. It's about the football club. It's about us all being one. And it's something I've looked to try and achieve since I've been in the football club. And it does feel like that's very much in our offering now. It's a real together football club. Phil just said it's something that's really important to me. And I do feel like it's all coming together very much at the right time. We have to do our job. We have a responsibility on the pitch to continue the good work we feel we've done over the last few years, and we're looking to, as I say, to have some success next year, and it will feel more rewarding next year, Seb, because we will all be able to experience it together. It would have felt a little bit hollow and a little shallow this year, like the Oldham game did, if we'd have achieved something and we couldn't have all experienced it together. Next year is centenary year. Next year is the big year for the football club and the biggest year in the club's history. We want success to top that off, and it's our responsibility to try and serve that up for the fans and everyone involved in the football club.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Gary, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, we all want that thing. There's a great togetherness at the club, and all being well, we will be celebrating our official start of our centenary celebrations on May the 22nd with a game with fans and the odd celebrity, and maybe an ex-player, or maybe even a couple of the current players might just run on for 20 minutes at the Bev. And all being well, as I said, it's March the 5th. Who knows what happened, but the fans will be able to come into that. That's the plan, and that's the thing we're working towards. So what a great way to start the celebrations of what should hopefully be a successful season. But I want to thank Phil, Rue and Gary and Mark, not just for their time this afternoon, but also their efforts across this whole season. Genuine privilege to be part of, and I think speak for all fans. Thank you very much for all your efforts on all areas of the football club. But yeah, thanks very much, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of Radio Beaver Podcast. Speak soon. Cheers.